Hello all, welcome to Reading and Guidance. My name is Molly. I am an astrologer and today's topic is healing, identifying and healing ancestral generational trauma using astrology. Now, in my humble opinion, our astrology chart, our soul's curriculum, our soul's map, whatever you want to call it, holds not just the diagnostic for understanding ailments in our life, mental, physical, etc., spiritual, but also the medicine, right? So it was Paracelsus, one of the forefathers of medicine, and an astrologer, who said, "What determines if something is a poison or a medicine? The dose, right? The awareness of the application of that same thing." And so with the tool of astrology, it's so beautiful because we can understand these ailments, these dis-eases that really can start in the mind and then sometimes manifest into a physical thing, but it shows us these inherited kind of predispositions or karmas, you could say. And just like our DNA and medical picture, part of those things are determined through genetics, and part of them are epigenetic or get turned on or activated depending on our choices, the way that we work with energies, the way we live our lives, etc., and also environmental factors, right, that can turn on or off these various predispositions, you could say. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the signatures that I think are really common to pointing to very ancestral generational wounds, limiting beliefs, circumstances, etc. And also how these very things can actually be our greatest strength. And so we're looking at them and finding them in the chart, not just to be like, woe is me, I have a lot of these things and I'm a victim. No, it's to empower you. It's to have that recognition, that greater, broader perspective that on some level, your soul actually chose these challenges, these circumstances, this ancestry, this lineage, so that you can be that medicine, be that healer. And so one very apparent example that comes to mind in astrology is this idea of Chiron, the asteroid slash dwarf planet, who is a centaur in mythology, named after a centaur in mythology, and represents in the chart planets, configuration, house placement, sign placement, etc., aspects. It represents our deepest wounding, but our greatest medicine. So Chiron was a very Jupiterian figure. And if you don't know in astrology, the planet Jupiter has a lot to do with healing, the healer, the guru and the priest as well, the clergy. And so Chiron had this amazing tool bag of healing, like herbalism, body work or hands-on healing, Chiron, right, where we get that word chiropractic, hands-on touch healing with the hands. And he knew all these healing modalities. Why? Because he lived with, and according to some astrologers, I think they say he had these ailments that he could never really heal in himself. I'm not sure I buy into that part of it, but the idea is he earned all this beautiful medicinal knowledge through the struggle and through walking in the foot of that ailment. And so Chiron in our chart holds a really big clue as to what we can offer of our greatest medicine to others, because we've walked in those shoes. You know, I've met people who have very rare genetic conditions, diseases, etc., that boggle modern medical practitioners, and modern medical practitioners have very much let them down and can't really help them. Why? Not just because it's super rare and they've never seen it, but they literally can't relate to it. They don't understand it from a textbook that they've read, and they've never experienced it. So it's boggling to them. And so these people often get the best support and the most support from others who have this very rare condition or circumstance. Just like who would best aid someone with cancer? Probably someone who has healed themselves of cancer. They would probably give the best advice. Again, everything is person to person, but we can understand or start to see the theme that often that greatest wound is our most beautiful prized gift. And don't forget that. So when we get into these examples, I don't want people to be like, oh my God, I have this, and I'll doomsay. Because if anything, this video is to inspire you to tap into the power of that. So I thought it's really interesting because people don't know this, but the reason I brought up Paracelsus and medical healing, astrology was more ancient than medicine. Astrology's been around like 4,000 years. Medicine is like 100 years old. I mean, you could argue older, but at least like modern chemistry, etc. And people don't realize that Paracelsus, great example, forefather of modern medicine, he was an astrologer. They understood the human organism or any living thing in relation to its environment through astrology. And in genetics, in DNA, we have 4 chemical bases divided into groups of 3. And in astrology, we have 4 primary elements divided into permutations of 3. So these are the modalities: cardinal, fixed, mutable. And I don't know, it just really touches me, these like beautiful poetic patterns that we find, and really links our medical healing with this knowledge of astrology. And a lot of people think of astrology as just a purely psychological thing, but it helps us heal on the mind, body, spirit level. And it's argued that actually a lot of disease that manifests in our physical organism has its roots in what? Our mind. And you could say these inherited conditionings, moon, which is very much ruled by the moon, and circumstances that program this, right? So I'm going to get into the main examples of things that point to generational patterning that is meant to be overcome in this lifetime. So one of the first things that comes to mind is malefics and hard aspect to the moon. So the moon decodes our karma. The moon is our most instinctual, habitual way of receiving nurturance. It's also the mother, you could say. So if we think back to even further from our birth mother, it's our lineage on a very soul level. So when we have malefics like Saturn, Mars, Pluto, Uranus, outer planets too, in hard aspect, like a square, opposition, conjunction with the moon, it's really unveiling like a deeper karma around those planetary themes that wants to be looked at. And you can see maybe what wasn't given, what the moon couldn't receive, what was blocking that nurturance or was blocking this feeling of wholeness, really, because ultimately the moon is about how we nourish and feel like we just feel good. and we can feel our feelings, right? So that is probably one of the first main things I would look to. Another main signature would be any malefics conjunct the south node of the moon, or Ketu. The south node of the moon is very much speaks to past lives, very much speaks to even our early upbringing if you don't believe in reincarnation. It speaks to, it's almost like the neural pathway, right, that got grooved over and over. So planets conjunct there, from at least an evolutionary astrology perspective, is speaking to like a deeper conditioning, and almost can keep us in that familiarity and prevent us from moving towards that evolutionary north node axis of the thing. And so a lot of the key to resolving planets in hard aspect to the south node is looking at the north node and what is not only the energetics of that north node, but if there's planets there that can help be that force that helps us evolve and grow. I'm going to bring my notebook out because I don't remember all of the ones I wrote down. Another one I would say, speaking in line with like just this moon theme, would be malefic planets in the fourth house. So the fourth house is our home in a very mundane sense of the fourth house, but it's also our mind, which is very much imprinted upon based on that like early upbringing, parental conditioning, etc. So Mars, Saturn, Uranus, some of these more stressful planets in the fourth. Uranus can speak of destabilization in the home, Mars, separation, Saturn, exclusion, or and Mars can also speak to violence, abuse. Same with Pluto, but it's so important to notice if there's stressors in the fourth, because this speaks to a very deeply rooted wounding that needs to be addressed. Specifically, if it's really close proximity to the IC Imam Coli. This is the lowest angle of the whole chart, and this is our taproot. And the opposite angle is the 10th house, the midheaven. And so it needs to be looked at and addressed, because stressful aspects or planets there can really be almost like an unhealthy taproot, right? Like a sick taproot, that without nourishment, we can't create that fruit, that harvest, that blossom of the 10th house of like our higher service of why we came here, our way that we can be of service. And it's also worth pointing out that often when we are in a tumultuous struggle or undergoing challenges, some of these really deep karmic challenges, the best remedy for that is in the 10th house of being in one's purpose and of being of service, what they call karma yoga. And, obviously, given different circumstances, that's not always a possibility, but whenever possible, I would say that's always a great avenue to look at. All right, if I can find where I took my notes. Okay. So some other points. Pluto with the with any of the personal planets is definitely a very, I'm just gonna put this here, I have my notes here, is a very ancestrally tied, challenging karma. Pluto is a very generational planet, and it represents a very heavy energy of having to overcome a lot and really go into like the depths. So when Pluto touches a personal planet angle in your chart, it's more pertinent that these plutonic underworld themes really are gonna play a big role in what you have to kind of transmute, transform to step into that power that it ultimately has. And so I'm thinking of like hard aspects of Pluto to the sun, the luminaries, the moon, Venus. That's a really big one. I have a lot of videos actually in my library with my friend, fellow astrologer Mario, where we discussed a lot of these aspects at great length and how to really harness them. But so check out those videos if you have that. But the idea is Pluto can represent where there's such a unconscious fear, because usually these like past, way generational, way far back ties to that, whatever that planet it's touching, being like a scary thing, being something that maybe was deadly, was dangerous. And when we think of Pluto, it's going into the underworld. But when you go deep enough, you actually hit treasure. You literally find ore, minerals, gold, all that stuff. So people that have these like Pluto personal planet aspects are really being invited to step into like a great power that can actually be quite influential because, again, Pluto is so generational. But I think of like Pluto with the sun, there's like a fear around shining and being seen and being in one's like identity. Pluto with the moon, a deep fear, like a threat around expressing one's emotions. And like an example I could give is someone who has that perhaps being like so fearful of expressing their emotion, yet when they do, it's like it's so deep, it's so profound that it touches so many people's hearts, you know, with that Pluto, that generational contact. So you have this profound influence you can really tap into. Pluto, Venus, you know, there's a fear around intimacy, like a danger connected even to intimacy. And a lot of it, it's again, because it's Pluto, it's not even from this remembered lifetime. It can go back so much deeper, and it's really helping to heal a whole generation. And that is really powerful. T-squares in the chart, really squares in general, but specifically a T-square where you have two planets squaring a third. These are really stressful, and specifically in fixed signs, and then a cardinal square where you have 4 planets in a square. Squares in astrology are 90-degree angles. Specifically with the Malefics, it can show where there was a lot of struggle. And ultimately, I always tell people it's a step though. Like a square is a step when you turn it on its head and like get to that other side of it. It's really powerful. And a grand fixed square, when you have these like 4 planets squaring, is one of the more rare astrology configurations, similar to a Yod, which I'll talk about. But this grand fixed square, I mean, you can, with a lot of astrology software, look up charts of people who have these various configurations. And it was some of the most prominent people have grand fixed squares in their chart, and like powerful leaders. And you're thinking, wow, like, because a lot of people want to play the victim. Oh, I have a hard chart, it's so stressful. They actually had to go through the most transformation and tap into so much strength, right? And so they end up being very powerful through that process and then can guide others. And so really understand these things as like powerful initiations. Yes, is it showing ancestral trauma and generational wounds that need to be resolved, but it's also like of such service. And with awareness can help prevent not only like passing it down to the next generation, but just helping people along various parts of that path. Because with the square, it's more apparent, it's more obvious, right? It's like an obvious tension that wants to be resolved. And this brings me to my next aspect to me that speaks to heavy ancestral wounding, which is Yods, also called the finger of God or the finger of fate. And this is quite a rare planetary configuration, but plenty of people have them. That is 2 sextiles, 2 60-degree planets at a 60-degree angle, both quincunx or in conjunct 150 degrees, a third apex planet. So it's a really interesting configuration because the 2 planets that are sextiling are kind of in cahoots, you could say. Like they're synergizing well, but they're both at odds with this third planet. And depending on what that planet is, like if it's the sun or your moon, that can be very undermining, right? And so the idea is we can see it so that we can see this like this friction that's happening. There really are like 2 blind spots preventing that third apex planet from like fully being in its power, right? Again, like all these things I'm talking about, it's going to depend on the sign, nakshatra even, house placement, and overall astrology chart. But the Yod people, you could say, souls came in to be cycle breakers. And that's what's so beautiful about it. They are here to maybe be feel a little outcasted or different with that tension within them, but it's ultimately so they can break this like ancestral cycle. It's a very common pattern I've seen time and time again in charts. And so these are just some examples. Another example I wanted to give was probably like Neptune with the Ascendant, or even you could maybe even generalize to Pisces Rising or Pluto on the Ascendant, or really any Malefic on the Ascendant, because it's showing a life that's like orienting through struggle of some way, navigating through that to get to the other side. And particularly Neptune Pisces, because it brings up themes of the 12th house, which is all about liberation from the trauma, the drama, all of that stuff. And if you have any of these difficult planets on the Ascendant, it can definitely point to coming in with this like kind of heavy purpose, but ultimately it's like, well, how much tools, how much can you learn along that journey, as like circumnavigating as it might be, to then you utilize that wisdom, that experience to help others and to help yourself, right? Because we can't really be of service to others until we've like transmuted it within ourselves. So don't forget that. Don't feel like you need to go and be a hero right away, because ultimately these stressors, these patternings within us are meant to be looked at from a very loving, caring, nurturing place. And through that self-acceptance, through that self-love, we come to the other side. But if we don't know what it is, it's like we're kind of walking in the dark. So I hope this was helpful, guys. It's not exhaustive. There's probably many other signatures. And if you have other signatures that you have found to be markers for this, please comment below. If you have any of these placements and you feel like you want to share a gem of wisdom, or ways you've even like transmuted some of these energies, please, by all means, share below. It'll be useful to others watching or finding this video. If you found this video at all useful or helpful, please, at the very least, you can just like it, subscribe to my channel if you wish, or share with a friend. And if you guys are piqued to have an individual reading, an individual session, like you might know that you have some of these signatures and be curious about how it plays out in your unique soul's map, then you can always reach out to me for a reading, and my website is below. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your support in my pursuit of my passion. Have a beautiful day.